Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar this morning. We'll give extra 5 minutes before we kickstart. Let's just have some other people joining. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Ijama Igwe. I'm the Senior Program Officer with the Rule of Law and Empowerment Initiative, also known as Partners West Africa, Nigeria, P1. We are a women-led non-governmental organization dedicated to enhancing citizens' participation and improving security governance in Nigeria and West Africa broadly. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This webinar is in commemoration of the International Women's Day with the theme Accelerate Action. Our webinar focuses on discussing accelerating action for women's inclusion in governance. In 2019, P1 commissioned a study beyond voting, increasing women's participation in Nigeria's political process to examine the dynamics of women's participation in the political process in Nigeria. The research findings reveal that various factors, including economic, political, cultural, religious, and legal challenges, serve as significant barriers to women's involvement in politics. These obstacles have resulted in a notably low percentage of women participating in the political process when compared to their male counterparts. P1 also, during the 2023 elections, carried out a gender-based security threat assessment, and findings from the assessment during the elections confirmed that 1,556 women contested for various positions out of the 15,331 candidates, and only 75 of the women spread across all the 6 geopolitical zones were elected to occupy political seats. And the 75 women who successfully won the polls got their victories challenged at the election petition tribunals, while the remaining 1,481 women did not contest the outcome of their contested elections. And this could be due to a combination of varied challenges, which our findings also observed. On the part of the government, they've taken certain steps to enhance women's political participation, including the adoption of the National Gender Policy, which recommends that women occupy 35% of parliamentary seats. Also, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015, which aimed at creating a safe environment for women to participate in politics by tackling gender-based violence and discrimination, and so many other initiatives. However, despite these commitments and varied global and national efforts, women continue to be significantly marginalized in politics, with systemic barriers hindering women's full participation. With this, we want to ask how committed and dedicated are other stakeholders to support and strengthen the government's efforts to improve women's political participation? Or what efforts are other stakeholders making to reinforce the positive steps that government seems to take? Lately, conversations are ongoing in the country concerning women's underrepresentation in politics. Out of 109 senators, we have only 3 females, with 1 just suspended yesterday. And with the House of Reps, we have a total of 360 members, out of which only 17 are women. As we all know, increasing the number of women in leadership positions is essential not only for equality, but also for the development of our country. This webinar aims to discuss the urgency of addressing gender inequality in political leadership, reinforcing the need for swift and strategic interventions, and chart the way forward on actionable strategies to foster women's involvement in politics. We have an exciting and insightful session ahead with the panelists and key stakeholders who will share their perspective, ideas, and experiences on the topic. As I said earlier, increasing women's representation in governance is not only about equality, but also essential for the sustainable development of our society. In today's webinar, we will explore the women's journey in politics so far, challenges, experiences, opportunities, and strategies that can drive meaningful change. Before we go on to introduce our keynote speaker and panelists, we would like to have our guiding rules for the webinar. So for decorum and for us to have a smooth sailing webinar today, we would want everyone to mute their mic when they are not speaking. And please use the raise hand icon button when you wish to speak. Unmute your mic when you want to speak. Please reserve your questions, comments, and suggestions till the interactive session when we allow everyone to make a contribution. You may feel free to put your thoughts down in the chat box. We'll gather all of this and would also read it out for everyone to see. So once again, thank you for joining our webinar this morning. And I'd like to briefly introduce our esteemed panelist and keynote speaker, who will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. We have with us our keynote speaker this morning, Dr. Maurice Ogbonnaya. We have Adora Onyechere Signijak, who is the Executive Director, Gender Strategy Advancement International. And we have Hajia Sadautu Salisu Ushao, the first chairperson, Tundu Wada LGA Kano State, and the first female chairperson of the Association of Local Government Chairmen of Kano State, ALGON. Now, let's get started with our first session, which will be facilitated by Dr. Maurice Ogbonnaya, our keynote speaker. Dr. Maurice Ogbonnaya is a senior fellow at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS, in Kuru, Nigeria. He holds a PhD in political science from the University of Uyo, Nigeria. His research interests encompass security and strategic studies, conflict management, peace building, policy analysis, and legislative practice. He will be discussing with us today women's political participation, the journey so far. We are excited to hear your insights, sir. Over to you, Dr. Maurice.
Thank you very much, Ijoma. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, loud and clear, sir.
Oge, please, can you bring up the slides? I have some slides I want to share. But first, let me thank P1 for inviting me to participate in this very important event, contributing, as always, to advancing the cause of women participation in politics. I'm asked to speak on women participation in politics, the journey so far, and the question I ask is how far? Because of time, I would want to limit our discussions to the Fourth Republic that started in 1999. And the next slide, and part of the issues that has been making the round since 2015 precisely is the controversy around the place of women. For some, the argument is whether women belong to the other room or the room, as we have come to hear, or the next slide, the place of the women, is it in the parliament? These issues have dominated discussions around women participation in politics for the past 24 good years, since 1999. And today again, we want to look at how far we have come. The next slide. Now, since 1999, Nigeria has conducted 7 general elections, and the record of women's political representation across levels and tiers of government has been mixed, somewhat mixed, as the statistics will show. The next slide. Are you there? Okay, thank you. Look at the table here from 1999 to 2023. This is an attempt to push the facts as they are concerning the composition of women in all the elective positions in Nigeria. The office of the president, vice president, Senate, House of Reps, governors, deputy governors, and state assemblies. From 1999 till 2023, the highest level of representation has been, I think, around, no, don't go to the next slide. Remember where we are, please. Yes. The highest level of representation for women across board has been 21.2%. That is, or 22.2%. That is for deputy governors in 2023. About 8 women were elected as deputy governors in 2023, representing 22.2% of the 36 deputy governors across Nigeria. For Senate, it has continued to oscillate between 4% to 8%. And ironically, for this current 10th Assembly, women representation in the Senate is about 6.4%, and for state and the House of Reps is 4%, 3.7%, and for House of Reps is 4.72%. The next slide, where we'll try to disaggregate the data in a more comprehensible and reader-friendly manner. When you look at women representation in Nigerian Senate from 1999 to 2023, you see that from 1999 it was 2.8%, and then rose to the highest point in 2007 and 2015, where we had 7.3%. That has been the highest, and then fell very badly in 2023 to 3.7%. We may need to correct the impression created by Ijoma in her opening remarks. What we have are 4 female senators at the moment, because Akpoti actually won her case in court and had to come to the Senate. So what we actually have are 4 female senators. The next slide will show us in the House of Representatives between 1999 and 2023. In 1999, it was 3.3%, and then in 2011 rose to 7.2%. That has been the highest, and fell again in 2023 to 4.7%. The next slide. Okay, are you there? The next slide, please. Okay, are you there?
The slides have been changed, sir. What can you see on your screen, sir? Hello, sir.
But can you hear me, please?
We can hear you, sir. So what we have on the screen is female elected positions, candidates, and representation in 2019.
In 2019.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you have, in 2019, we had 6 presidential aspirants that were women and 22 vice presidential aspirants. Then we had 6,563 aspirants for Senate and for State National Assembly, Senate, and House of Reps, and 763 women candidates in the National Assembly. For Senate, 232, and for House of Reps, 528. The next slide. Female elected positions, candidate, and representations in 2019. When you go to the next slide, you see the state of affairs. Are you there?
Yes, sir. We are seeing the slide of state of affairs, sir.
State of affairs. Thank you very much. Now, between 1999 and 2003, Nigeria has made no significant progress in women representation in politics. Women constitute 49.4% of the country's population, but less than 10% when it comes to political representation. On all indicators, the 2023 general elections in Nigeria fell below expectations of improving the level of women participation in politics, whether as candidates, as election security officials, or election observers and election officials. Although women constituted 47.5% of the total registered voters, they constituted a paltry 10% of the total number of candidates in the elections. Out of the 15,307 candidates featured by the 18 registered political parties for the general elections, women were 1,553, representing 10.1% of the total number of candidates, while 1,487 of them, representing 96% of female contestants, lost out in the election. Only 76, representing 4%, won. 4 women eventually won through the court, was elected into the Senate, and 17 into the House of Representatives, 8 as deputy governors, and 48 as members of the state houses of assembly. This development fell short of the 2015 and 2019 statistics, which is a negation of the principle of affirmative action. Are you hearing me, please?
Loud and clear, sir.
Now, if you go to the next slide, I have opined here that the situation we have captured above is projected to get worse in the years ahead. In other words, women participation in politics are projected to decline in the years ahead. And the reasons are as follows. Number one, 65% of about 12 million out-of-school children in the Northeast are girls. Please mute your microphone. 65% of 12 million out-of-school children in the Northeast are girls, and 15 out of 20 girls in the Northwest are given out in marriage before they turn 20. In Southeast and South-South, young women have dropped out of school and taken to marriage, kidnapping, and militancy. And this makes the future very bleak for women, with implications for their participation in politics. This situation that we have painted above is despite the plethora of frameworks at the national, international, and local levels to enhance women participation in politics. If you go to the next slide, you will see a lot of institutional, policy, and legal frameworks, including the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic as amended, the Electoral Act, and the Gender and Equality Opportunities Commission and the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Establishment Act, which is in Plateau State and other states. are all there to ensure that women participate actively in politics. However, this is not the case. And then the question is why? Why do we think the situation has remained very bleak despite the abundance of institutional, legal, and policy frameworks to ensure enhanced women representation in politics? You go to the next slide. I have tried to enumerate what I call the dominant narratives. Number one, Ijoma alluded to that fact. Nigeria is a patriarchal society that pays more attention to the male folk and the neglect and exclusion of the female folk, including in school enrollment, among other indicators. Number two is that sociocultural practices have conditioned women to see politics as the exclusive preserve of men and men's affair, where women are not permitted to play very prominent roles. The third is that electoral laws are not gender sensitive and do not encourage women to participate in politics. Then the fourth is that politics is violence prone and women abhor violence. The fifth is that politics is capital intensive and women do not have adequate financial resources to engage in politics. The sixth is that political meetings hold at night. I had this discussion with a female political aspirant who told me that political meetings hold at night and women don't like participating in late night meetings. Please, are you following me?
Yes, we are.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yes, we are following, sir.
The final point I want to make under the dominant narrative is that women do not support their own. Some people say when it comes to politics, women would prefer to align with men rather than to support their own. These are some of the issues that have been adduced and advanced over time as to why women participation in politics in Nigeria and generally across Africa has continued to dwindle. But there is something I called the reality. If you go to the next slide, please. I have a slide that I have tried to marshal out some other reasons that I think play more important role in dwindling women participation than the ones we've seen above. Number one is that women do not see politics as a career. They don't see it as a business that needs to be invested in. That's the reality. No, remain there. Women do not see politics as a career. They don't see it as a business that needs to be invested in. Men sometimes mortgage their property, mortgage so many things to ensure participation in politics. And I think women will begin to see politics as a career. They will begin to see politics as business that needs to be invested in. The second point is the need for women to be transformed from voters to electorate. At the moment, women only participate in voting. They are not electorates. Electorate means that they need to be voted for. And the reason is they adopt a defeatist approach to politics and so do not think and position strategically. If I ask us in this meeting, how many of us women are planning and preparing for 2027 general election? It won't be shocking to know that the number will not be many. We want to see where parties are zoning their different positions before we begin to indicate interest. The third point I want to make is that power is never given for the asking. It is fought for. Women will need to take risk in politics, fight for power. Don't sit down waiting that it will be thrown at you. That's not correct. Power is fought for. It's never given for the asking. Although there are regulatory frameworks, policy frameworks, institutional frameworks to ensure that women are adequately represented, 35% affirmative action, it will never come until women begin to take it by force. They need to mobilize for it. They need to fight for power. Then the fourth point is that women have a lot of silo mentality. All the women-based organizations, whether the National Council for Women's Society, Form 1, FIDA, Catholic Women Organization, and so many others, work in silos. In the last 10 years, maybe Partners West Africa, Nigeria has done a lot to see how women can be brought together and mentor them to participate in politics. Besides that, I'm not seeing much effort by women-based organizations to ensure a collective and broad-based approach to women participation in politics. But more importantly, I have had opportunity to interact with very prominent female politicians. And at every point in time, I will ask them, where are your mentees? Where are your mentees? If you go back to political history in Nigeria, you still see people in politics stressing their mentorship to the likes of Awolowo and many others. For women, where are their mentees? Those who have succeeded in politics. It is lacking. And then the final point is that women pay more attention to what I've described as Owambe mentality, giving undue attention to issues that do not matter. For example, call a political meeting today. Women will be interested in what we need to wear. We need to do ashobi. We note for us in politics, those things don't matter. What matters is your physical presence and not how you appear. Because if you're physically present, it will be very difficult for anyone to take decisions that are detrimental to you as an individual. The next slide, please. Beyond 2023, the question is, what lessons for the future? Okay, are you there? The next slide. The next one. Beyond 2023, what lessons are there for the future? I've tried to point out certain things I think women will need to do in future as we prepare for another round of elections in 3 years from now to ensure their adequate representation in politics. Number one, women will need to transform themselves from voters to electorate and contestants. Voters maintain passive attitude to politics and political process. Electorates and contestants maintain active and critical positions. They challenge and question the process. They define expectations from the process, from the institutions, and from the human actors in the process. Again, women will need to work as one. Do not be an onlooker. Be concerned with things that matter in society. Women will need to mentor younger generation of women. Those that have succeeded in politics will need to mentor younger generation of women. And women will also need to take risk and position themselves strategically. Form women-based political parties. I am not a lawyer, but at least I know the extent to which I can find a law. There is no law anywhere in Nigeria that forbids women forming women-based political parties. If you have a woman or women-based political parties, you future senatorial candidates across 36 states, you future 36 gubernatorial candidates, you future 36 deputy governors, you feature only women in state houses of assembly, in the House of Reps. I can tell you by the time that election is done, that election cycle is completed, you have more than 35% women representation across political positions. The next slide. I will encourage women, as Arnold Wolfers said, to ensure that they are not indifferent. No, it's not the conclusion, please go back. To ensure that they are not indifferent to power, because those who are indifferent to power run the risk of being overtaken by power seekers. And in conclusion, it is important for us to know that currently 4 out of the world's top 10 countries in terms of women's share of single or lower house of parliament are in sub-Saharan Africa. 4 out of 10. Rwanda, in Rwanda, it is now 50-50. 50-50. Men 50, women 50. In Seychelles, in Senegal, and of course in South Africa. And Nigeria cannot be left alone. Women will need to rise to the challenge. And for women to rise to the challenge, the next slide, you cannot afford to be an onlooker, because it is a matter of national emergency. Every onlooker, according to Frantz Fanon, is either a coward or a traitor. Every woman needs to get involved. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for that detailed presentation. Indeed, women need to rise to the challenge. And as you've said also from your presentation, there's a lot of work to be done. This leads us perfectly into our next session of discussion by our next speaker, Mrs. Adora Onyechere Sinijak. She is the Strategy Advocacy Lead at Human Capital Africa. She's a gender advocate, an inclusive policy expert, a researcher on gender issues, and a loud voice in the advocacy for women inclusion. She's also the Executive Director, Gender Strategy Advancement International. Ma, Adora, based on your experience, what would be your thoughts on the current status of women in politics in Nigeria, and given the statistics by Dr. Morris, our keynote speaker? So, how would you rate our performance in comparison to other nations in the sub-region? You're welcome, Ma, and over
Thank
to
you.
you.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Loud
Yes,
and
we
clear, Ma.
All right. I would like to say many thanks to Doctor for laying out that foundation and those, hard facts that he spoke about, which were very intentional. So I just want to touch a few points on what he said, leaning that he was our keynote speaker before I go directly into my speech and my conversation. And for me, I feel that yes, women are not where we ought to be, but we're not where we used to be. However, the where we are now is abysmal compared to other countries. However, there are also underlying factors, such as stereotypical leaning on the fact that women must take power by force, must act like the men before they are able to be incorporated into the political ecosystem. And I think these are conversations we need to be sensitive and deliberate about, especially as we're looking at a larger ecosystem of young women who are onlookers, who are watching and wondering on the best practice approach to be able to get into politics. I remember when we use the word force, we must also be accountable to the expression and how people internalize it. Because the basic meaning of force is aggression. It means, something that is fierce. It means something that can be violent. So how do we also depict the use of the word force within the context that a woman must take power by force? And it also means that in the context of taking power, are we looking at institutional reforms, better, or are we looking at the context of political power? So these are some of the things I feel that we need to start to, demystify the stereotypes around it. Because what we also must be able to project is the fact that women go into leadership position, not just as women, but also as reformers. And I think that's for me what I wanted to state out there. Secondly and finally on his conversation is the fact that in terms of the collaboration within agencies, the agency of women, whether it is FIDA or civil society, I feel that the collaboration should be essentially a co-creation space where everybody, every platform, every agency have a strength within their capacity to be able to contribute their kind of quota in the space for inclusion for women, in the conversation on breaking the barriers for women. And I think what we probably would also be speaking to is, how can we become more strategic? Because I know that whether we are working in silos, that could be, yes, a mention to the fact. But again, I think the direction should be, how can we be more strategic? Example is the fact that we are clocking 30 years, Beijing signatory to of course the UN declaration, and you want to find out how far so far, because the inclusion year for the deadline is 2030. How much have we done? What have we done since we have become signatories to that, Beijing conference? And what are the punitive measures for countries that default on those lines? So I think strategy and accountability may be where, the agencies of women and those who are working within the context of democracy can look at reforming those ideals. And for me, that's where I'll go. Now, coming back to the question you've asked me, I'm going to just approach my conversation from a storytelling mechanism, because I feel that we are all very perhaps aware that women's space in Nigeria is shrinking. And I think for me, that is what is more directly concerns me, not just as a Nigerian woman, but as also a woman who has attempted to run for elective positions in the 2019 elections. For a woman who has also been an appointive member of a public office cabinet as a senior special assistant to a governor. And I know that some of those spaces are shrinking the more. Again, all because of the fact that one, data is not exemplified in some of the conversations we have at the higher level. Again, even in the exemplifying with data, what do we do in the context of using them to create reforms? And that's where I think my conversation will coming from. I know that we have talked about the statistics for women in power. Gender social norms index states that 8 out of 10 women and 9 out of 10 men in Nigeria believe that men make better leaders than women do, or that it is not essential for women to have the same rights as men. And this is subconscious. And this subconsciousness actually drives or is driven from a place of socialization, starting from the family, starting from the school, starting from the social sectors like the church, like the traditional institutions. So it didn't just start today for women to feel or normalize the patriarchy in the system. Patriarchy was a form of socialization that has already been woven into our social factors and our fabrics, like the family. And I will say this, that when you talk about bias against gender equality, especially in political situation, it means that women are marginalized from fully participating in the highest decision-making positions. And this exclusion is evidence. Let's go to the after the 2019 elections, about 5 to 8% of elected legislators for the House of Reps and 7 to 0.3% legislators for the Senate were women. And with that statistic, this ranked Nigeria 180 out of 193 countries ranked by the percentage of women in parliament by the IPU. And sadly, we all know, very sadly, that there is yet to be a female governor in any of the 36 states or a successful candidate for the presidency in Nigeria. And we have countries like Namibia just having their first female president, and looking at also domesticating rural participation of women in the municipalities. And I say this because when we are talking about mainstreaming women in politics, people just think it's about joining political parties. No, it's also about looking at the policy framework of governance, the policy framework of the institutions, and how they are also inclusive in their portraying. And I think that this is one way we can also look at it. That when we think politics, politics is a way of life. Politics is how we convene. Politics is how we speak, how we engage, what we talk about. And that again is a voice ecosystem. So how are women's voice thriving in that space? And the clear example is the fact that if we don't start to route these conversations from that atmosphere, by the time we just jump to the political party participation, we're not looking at preparation, we're not looking at planning. We then see an evolution of women who come out ready to run the race, willing to serve, but very ill prepared. And this is why sometimes it looks as if the men have the upper hand. Remember that they will say, oh, do you ask men to prepare? The answer is no. However, because women are naturally reformers, it is for me that I feel that we should have the modicum of courage to become pace setters in whatever environment that we speak of. Rwanda ranks first globally with 61% of women in the single lower house, and Nigeria ranks last at 180. The last, that's 180 out of 180, with a mere 4% of women in the lower house. Now, if you look at 6 African countries like Rwanda, South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, even Ethiopia, they have achieved 40% or higher in women's representation in the lower house. And these are some of the things that we need to start looking at accountability for. And when it comes to preparation, I'm also looking at the fact that the gender disparities in educational access persist across many African countries. The data from African Development Bank 2021 shows that girls often do not have equal access to education. And when you do not have equal access to education foundationally, particularly in rural access, this limits the political engagement and leadership potential of women, starting from that age. So, bridging those gaps requires targeted interventions that will promote equal access to quality foundational learning for all children. And then it then takes it to preparing girls for political participation. He spoke about mentorship earlier on. How are we preparing the young girls? How are we preparing the next generation of girls? How are we teaching them about leadership roles in governance? How are we involving them in education and mentorship, particularly tailored to the unique challenges of political environments, which, of course, we all know is dominated by patriarchy. And socialization has made it so much so that we now even have women defending patriarchy, normalizing abuse and aggression against fellow women, because that was how they have been trained and wired from childhood to think that the men are those who are supposed to be in front and the women are supposed to be seen and not heard. And so when a woman echoes her voice to say, I have been sexually harassed, or to say, I have been sexually abused, you then begin to see victim shaming. You then begin to see women rallying, using their rapper to cover her, not for her to be able to amplify using their strength, but for her to cover herself because they feel that she is actually causing shame to the female gender because of those outbursts. And that's how they refer to it, as an outburst. So when we do not prepare girls for leadership roles in governance, which involves education and mentorship, we definitely erode them from being included in political environments. And again, that means that we have to go back to the drawing table to look at programs aimed at enhancing critical thinking, public speaking, negotiation skills. And this skill of negotiation and mediation is so important. If we watch what has been happening in the conversation in the social media space at the Senate leadership, and of course the chairman committee on diaspora, you would find out that these conversations are about, power broking between the male and the female. It is also about the mutiny, or will I say, the deafening of the voice of a woman, which simply represents the larger ecosystem of women in the political space. And that is the danger of what is happening. We are not looking at the personalities, we're looking at the danger of the issues thriving within a space where already patriarchy has been normalized. And somebody has become the social reformer to be able to speak to these issues as it is and as a matter of holding power accountable. So what we need to look at is, how do we now amplify these women, prepare them, especially from a young age, towards issues like public speaking and negotiation skills, which then promises results in increasing female leadership representation in local governance. And this is seen in the statistics from the UN Women in 2020. So I'm raising all of this conversation because at the moment, when we think about the representation across countries, I will just take you through countries with affirmative action that has worked. Now you have Rwanda, which has a global leader, which is a global leader in equality in politics. And they have a constitutional quota that requires at least 30% of parliamentary seats to be held by women. And as a result, what you now see is that women now hold more than 60% of those seats in Rwanda's lower house. And that makes it the highest percentage of women in any national parliament. I'm not talking about Africa, I'm talking about worldwide. Then you now go to Senegal, the legal quota, what they call the legal quota. So now, Senegal implemented a gender parity law in 2010. And that law mandated that political parties must field 50%. And this is coming from the political party structure, 50% of female candidates for legislative election. Now, this has also, if you check their statistics and the women holding the position, it's about 42% of seats in the National Assembly, making Senegal one of the leading African nations in terms of women's political representation. Then you go to Uganda. Yes, Uganda has an infraction rate of, holding down the media. Public speaking is not as free as it is in other countries, and they're very stringent with, freedom of association. But they have reserved seats. Uganda has a system of reserved seats for women in parliament, regardless of all of that. And what this means is that the system ensures that women hold a certain percentage of seats, which is currently about 35% of the total seats in the parliament, in addition to the reserved seats. So women also compete for general seats. So you see, they have the reserved seats, but then they can also compete for the general seat. Tanzania reserved seats has a mixed system of elected and reserved seats for women. They constitute, the constitution looks at it and reserve seats about 30% of seats in the National Assembly for women. And these reserved seats are filled through appointments by the president and through proportional representation based on party performance in the election. So it's a very tricky one. So depending on how well your party performs, you must be prepared to bring 30% of seats from that party that dominates in the election. In South Africa, you have what we call the voluntary party quota. While South Africa does not perhaps have a formal legal quota, political parties are strongly encouraged to adopt the gender quota. So this is still back to the political parties. The African National Congress, which is a leading party in South Africa, ANC, for example, adopted a policy that 50% of its candidates for both national and provisional elections must be women. So as a result, women hold about 45% seats in the National Assembly. And then you go to Mozambique, where Mozambique includes a minimum quota of 30% from their constitution for representation, and they hold a significant seat. You go to countries like Ethiopia also practices what we call voluntary party quota system. And that means that Ethiopia's ruling party, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, introduced the gender quota to ensure that at least 30% of candidates in parliamentary elections are women. And as of these recent elections, women make about 38% of seats in Ethiopia's parliament. And then you go to Angola. They also have what we call law requiring political parties to field at least 30% women. And then you go to Kenya. Now, Kenya is an interesting dynamic. And that is because even during the elections, I was there to observe the elections down to the time when they had the march to the National Assembly. Kenya's constitution mandates that 1/3 of members of parliament should be women. Now, with a specific quota for women representation, it's interesting to know that the implementation has been challenging, just like other countries who started this new. Women are yet to reach that mark. However, the system of nominated women representation, is helping to bridge that gap, because as of the last election in Kenya, We saw more women, over 7 women are now governors in the municipals, and more women in the lower house. So it's evolving. But the truth of the matter is that they do have a quota system that helps to look at reserve seats, constitutional quota for women. And then you have Lesotho. Lesotho is about I think about 30% of the seats in both the National Assembly and the Senate are reserved for women, and has also resulted in higher percentage. And then you have Tunisia. Tunisia is also interesting because what they look at is what they call the gender parity law, which is also almost like the affirmative action. However, Tunisia implemented the gender parity law in 2014, which is a few years down the line, requiring political parties to ensure equal gender representation. And as of the result of this now, Tunisia has 50% women's representation in its parliament. And I can tell you, for being an Arab country, this gender parity in Tunisia is actually very impressive. Zambia also has what we call the voluntary quota system, and also looks at 30% of women candidates for parliamentary election. Gabon, our neighbor Gabon in West Africa, just some few borders away, have what they call the legal quota. Okay, and what that means is that there is a law that is implemented that has reserved 30% of the parliamentary seats for women, and we now have a commensurate number of women that are now in the legislature for Gabon. And then Burundi also have a quota system and have about 30%. And now to Algeria, where we have about that same number of 30% of women in the parliament increase because of the law that mandates it through the gender quota. Now, I have given you about 15 or thereabout countries to sort of give you the kind of statistics that have shown that countries in Africa are also looking inwards to create an enabling environment using legislative measures and constitutional reforms to be able to increase women's participation. And now that brings me to Nigeria, because we all know that at the moment as we speak, there has been a call for special seats. The special seat bill has passed second reading at the National Assembly. And I do believe that this is the only way and the only reform that, if passed by the parliament and passed by the 2/3 of the state assembly, Nigerian women will then see about 74 special seats for women at the National Assembly, 37 at the higher Senate, 37 between the House of Rep and, of course, the state assembly. And so what that means is that the travesty of what happened in 2022, where 5 gender bills were voted out in the 10th assembly, would have found some sort of remedy by these 74 special seats. And that's why I'm saying that whatever we do as Nigerians, as co-creators of reforms for the kind of democracy that we want, as preparation towards 2027 election, the very first inroad for Nigeria as a country to take itself out of the statistics of 180 out of 180 is to pass the special seat bill. When we pass the special seat bill, we now have a legislation like other countries to be able to look at that quota for a cycle of 4 years, which means about 4 election cycles, which means about 16 years, to see how we can bring more women in, both at the higher parliament, at the lower and at the state level. So I will round up by saying that women's voices can only intensify through public pressure when we actually have legislation to guide them that will ensure that we have institutional and political reforms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma, for that beautiful insight. Thank you so much. To our participants, we hope you're noting your comments in the chat box, because we'll be going in there to read your contributions to the webinar, where we'll do like an open mic for everyone to contribute. So please put your comments, questions, and reservations in the chat box. We'll come back to it. This has really set the stage for our next discussion, and we are delighted to hear from Hajia Sadautu Salisu Yushau. She's the first chairperson, Tundu Wada Local Government Area in Kano State, and the first female chairperson of the Association of Local Government Chairmen of Kano State, ALGON. And now, from our research, you are the second ALGON chairperson in Nigeria. I would like to know what your experience has been so far, given with the discussions from our previous speaker. What has been your experience so far, and how have you been able to navigate those challenges? And also, would you also highlight some of the challenges and barriers women in northern Nigeria face in politics? We are very excited to hear your insights, man. You're welcome. Over to you, man.
Thank you. Good morning, all. I am Saadatu Salisu Yushowu, the first female chairman in Kano State and the first female ALGON chairman in Kano State as well. I didn't know that I was the second in Nigeria. So I am the second female ALGON chairman in Nigeria. Thank you. It's an honor to hear that.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, ma'am. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yes, ma'am. Very clear.
Okay. The question you sent is about the women in politics in northern Nigeria, the challenges they are facing, right?
Yes, ma'am. And your experience so far as the first female chairperson in ALGON and the first
We can spend the
chairperson in Tundu Wada LG.
experience, but I will speak in a nutshell.
Thank
You
you,
know,
ma'am.
northern Nigeria, they face significant challenges in politics, mainly due to cultural, religious, and societal barriers or norms. And most of these challenges, I think, is because in northern Nigeria, they feel that women should not be in politics. Mostly the politics in North, it's dominated by, not in North, in the world is dominated by men. So most of the times women feel this, like they don't have this confidence because it's dominated by men. So like the cultural and the religious barriers, many people believe in the leadership is a male-dominated space, like I said, making it difficult for women to gain support. They rally around, they will not support you because you are a woman in those days. Now things are changing. Most of the men, they get to understand that yes, women can at least lead. So they should get this support also. But this is the first time in Kano we are getting such. And sometimes because of financial constraints, politics requires significant financial resources, and women often struggle to secure funding compared to their male counterparts. You know how women, we have difficulties in things, most especially here in the North. Most of the business tycoons, the rich people in the North, all those things are dominated all by men. So sometimes it's difficult for women to get the financial resources if you want to get into politics. And men, they can get their friends to support them, to mobilize some things for them. Unlike women, you cannot just go and start looking for people to support you, or they will not even, you will not even have the courage to do that, because it's something that is not being done here in the North. And more also, we have lack of political support. Like I said, the parties are mostly controlled by men. You see, the chairman of the party is a man, chairman of party at local level, at state level, federal level, all the women, all the criteria of the leadership in the parties. It's only women leader that they give to women. You hardly see youth leader, a woman. You hardly see secretary, a PRO, all others. You will not see women in there. So mostly you will not, that is why still you cannot even get the support as a woman if you come in, because all the leadership is controlled all by men. And sometimes we are scared of intimidation and harassment because of religion, sometimes because of the gender. You get to be scared how you will interact with people because you are a woman. You are being, let's say, maybe all these like political touts and all these boys that are into drugs, that are into politics. Sometimes the way their manner of approach, you will be very scared if you are a woman. Women in politics, they face those threats, verbal abuse, and intimidation from opponents, especially if you are opposition. Yes, of course, there are men, so they will be intimidating you, and even within their parties, still they will be intimidating you. And sometimes, in the North, education is more or less more on men. Sometimes women, we get to be married at the age of 13, 14, 15. So limited education and exposure also, it adds to that. Many women, especially in rural areas, have limited access to education, making it difficult to compete in political spaces. Nowadays, if you are contesting for a councillorship, you will need to have at least a secondary school certificate, which is very difficult in the rural areas to have women. 10 women, if you add maybe like 100 women, 10 to 1, I think you will get a woman with certificate of secondary school as she has finished. With that also, it adds up again. Family and societal expectations. We are expected to prioritize our roles as wives and mothers over leadership. Most of the families, they will want you to get married, like I said. They want you to be in your husband's house, go and produce children, not to be in the politics. But all the same, it doesn't stop you from joining politics, even if you are married. Like now, I am married and I have my kids, but still I am married, I have kids, but still I am into politics, and it's not affecting me in any way. My husband has been very, very supportive. My kids also, they are even happy and they are proud that this is their mother doing so things. She's here, she's there, she's in social networks. They are seeing me, my achievements, whatever. So it's making them proud. And I'm with these things, I am becoming more popular in Kano, especially, but all over Nigeria. I know my news is heard everywhere because this is something that we have never had it in Kano. And sometimes, when it comes to voting, there is this bias. Many voters, including women, they prefer to vote for male candidates due to long-standing societal beliefs. But now things are getting better. Women are for women now, and we are giving them awareness campaigns everywhere. We give them seminars so that we support our gender. Then I think we are trying our best to see that women are into politics. More and more women get into politics. And this is how I navigated these challenges as the first female chairperson and now the Algon chairman. I don't like this chairperson, what I like the chairman because I'm representing the seat. So I'm the first female chairman and Algon chairman. I had to overcome these barriers through resilience, strategy, community engagement. I started with building grassroots support. I work closely with women and youth, especially youth, then the community leaders to gain their trust and support. Sometimes you need to have this financial planning. So I manage resources efficiently, and gain support, even though my husband was my backbone, and he supports me in always the financial side, everywhere. He supports me so much. And this you need to break the stereotypes. I demonstrated the women can lead effectively by giving them seminars, like I said, and conferences. We had so many sit-ins in my area with women. I get to explain to them how it will help them if they encourage women to be in politics, and they can lead effectively by focusing on impactful projects, especially in health and women's empowerment. Because if a woman is ruling, if she's leading, she will focus more on women. She will make sure that women, they don't have any problem. They are being supported very well, especially in the rural areas in terms of health. We are having so many challenges. How I wish I can one day go to my village and these NGOs can come in and see what women are facing in the rural areas, because we really women, we are very strong. Actually, women are very strong, because despite all the challenges, but still we used to say, yes, we can. Yes, we can. And sometimes you have to do the political networking, which you have to align with influential politicians and party leaders who will support your ambitions. Like in my own case, I have to sit with all our political leaders, some of the leaders in the village. I talk to them, I make some sense into what my ambitions are, and I explain everything to them so that they will give me that support that I needed. And thankfully, my father is one of the political figures in my area, though he is late, but I even garnered that support due to the way he did his own politics. He helped so many people. He did a lot of things. I doubt if there is any politician that worked as tirelessly as my father did in my area. So that also add up to the support I got from the party leaders, and because most of them, they were his boys in politics. And sometimes you have to do some few things that will make people believe you can do it, like empowering women. In the process of getting the support, you need to be empowering women. You need to be doing things that will make people have this relief, this sense of, to make them have this sense of belonging, to make them have courage in you. So you need to do some small things, like all this what do you call this, to teach them some of the vocational skills, like tailoring, like oil making, production of oil, like doing things like all this tofu, we call it awara. I used to get this kind of soya beans, all this granite. You do empowerment with it to empower them. I will sit with them, ask them, how much do you make in a day, and what do you need that will help you to boost your business. So I do that sometimes, and I have figures, because whatever I do, I document it so that I will leave a legacy. And in the end, I will want to write a book about myself, the one that will inspire more women to join politics, that will make them know that in politics, you don't need to say it's only for men, it's for all. Your gender will not be an obstacle. Just focus and make yourself useful, make yourself reliable, and make people believe in you. So I do empower women, I encourage them, and I mentored women to get involved in politics, proving that leadership is for everyone. And my experience as chairperson of Tudun Wada and the Algon chairman, it has been a challenge, A challenging but fulfilling journey. Being the first female in northern Nigeria, I knew I had to prove that women can lead effectively. The expectations were high, but I remained focused on delivering results. My priorities have been improving healthcare, services, education, and economic empowerment, particularly for women and youth. As Algon chairman, my responsibilities have expanded. Now they are more broader, requiring me to coordinate with other local government chairmen, addressing governance issues, and push for policies that benefit all local government areas in Kano. You know, Kano is very wide. We have 44 local governments in Kano. Now I receive calls here and there, all around Kano. Most of the women, they call me on anything, they will just call me. Hajia, this is what is happening in our own side. This is that. So I am everywhere, and I need to gather this courage and know how to even talk to women politically. Because if you are into politics, it's not all sorts of questions you can answer. It's not all sorts of questions you can give a negative or positive answer. Sometimes you'll give a positive answer, but it will come as a negative thing to your politics, and you will give a negative answer and it will be like a political taboo to you. Before you know it, this media, it has power. Media is very, very powerful. You will just see yourself on media and people will start talking bad about you. So you have to be extra careful, especially as a woman. You need to be careful how you talk to people, how you address issues, how you look at things from your own perspectives. So it is a very, very tough role. And I have to, there is a push for policies that benefit all local governments in Kano, but it's also an opportunity to set a precedent for women in leadership. Despite the challenges, I remain committed to making a difference and paving the way for more women to take up leadership roles in northern Nigeria. Thank you very much for the time, and thank you very much for inviting me into this platform.
Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you so much. I'm sure if we are here till maybe tomorrow, your experiences will keep flowing. But we thank you for that insightful presentation, and your persistence and resilience is offering hope and practical insight for other women facing similar obstacles, showing them that they too can break down barriers, I know, and yes, they can do it, just like you said. Thank you so much, Ma, for your contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from the panelists and keynote speaker, and we have some key points from our webinar, from our discussion so far. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and major key points we have includes accelerating women's political participation requires a multifaceted approach, such as legal and policy reform, electoral laws, looking at adopting gender quota, gender parity, safety and protection from violence, access to financial resources, for women-based political parties. Women should begin to see politics as governance and politics and governance as a career. Women-led organizations need to work together strategically and intentionally to promote women participation in politics. Changing cultural and religious societal attitudes and having a collective effort from governments, political parties, advocacy groups will help increase women's representation in politics. So also we have some points from our participants. Kennedy Francis said women should key into political networking and collaboration. Women understand that they have potential, strong will, and capacity, so we should make use of all of this. Gloria Ibrahim also said women really need mentorship and empowerment. Yes, and then Vatsa Muwe said socialization is also one way to answering the concern. And this, I think, was one of the points the panelists also pointed out during her discussion. So now, based on the theme, accelerating action for women's inclusion in governance, what do we think we need to do urgently to change in addressing gender inequality in political leadership? So participants will give you the time for you to have like an open mic where we all have the discussion. But if you have your thoughts, you can also put on the box. But I'd like Ms. Adora Onyechere Sinijak to give us her perspective on this. What do you think we need to do urgently to change in addressing gender inequality in political leadership? Over to you, ma'am.
I think I just it's all in the summation of what I said earlier: preparation, foundational literacy and planning, more access for young girls from an early age to have education, critical thinking skills, and that grows them into women who are prepared. But for us in this time and in this immediate emergency that we look at women's participation politically, like I said, quota system. The special seat bill is an opportunity for us to, rewrite the way that we have looked at social justice for women, and also look at being intentional about the political will to have women's voices amplified through those seats. There are only 4 women in the Senate, and I think about 15 or about 17 at the National Assembly. That's not enough, and you can imagine where the number is overwhelmed by the number of men. There will be less voices for pro-female policies. And so the only way we can actually, proceed is to have legislation that empowers the voices of women to not only participate equally, but to also increase the numbers at the parliament.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. Dr. Morris, over to you. Please, what's your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much, Ijoma. I also want to thank Adora for her very insightful contributions, especially the cross-country experiences that she brought to bear. I think there are lessons that we can learn from that, and that will form the basis of my response to the question you've just posed, Ijoma. Number one is the need for us to be deliberate about women representation in politics across levels. And that being deliberate will require making some policy and legal changes to achieve this. As we've seen from what Adora shared with us across Africa, there's need for some policy interventions, some legal amendments, and promulgation of laws to ensure that this happens. That's one. But from Ajia Sadatu, there's also a lesson to be learned by other women. In Kano State, for her to emerge not just as local government chairman, but Agon chairman of 44 local government, comes with a lot of zeal, commitment, and perseverance. She may not have told us how many times she has tried and failed, but definitely she must have been in the system for a very long time. She didn't just emerge. If we give her opportunity to share her full experiences, she didn't just emerge. That's the point I made earlier. There is need for women to position themselves strategically. Politics is not a shooting and shootout game. It's something that you need to be embedded in it over a period of time. People will need to know you. People will need to come to associate with the ideas you bring on board. It will be very easy for you to be elected when you come into election. But when you are completely out of the system, hoping that during 2027, for example, you will come and contest election, things are not done that way. That's the reality. Politics is a career, and people need to see it as such. It's a business that needs to be invested in, and women need to see it as such. So as we prepare for 2027, I will call on women-led organizations to begin to position themselves strategically, to begin to participate, to begin to demand, to begin to campaign for some adjustment in the institutions, in the policies, in the legal frameworks that have hindered women participation over the last 24 years of democratic governance in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I would hand over to Hajia. In 2 minutes, ma, would you just tell us what the way forward, an actionable strategy that we can foster women's involvement in politics with reference to the upcoming 2027 elections, ma?
I'm back again. We need to help women in politics. In helping them, it requires a combination of empowerment, support systems, and policy changes. We need to have this capacity building and training, financial and logistical support, creating or enabling policies and legal reforms, community engagement and awareness, networking and support system, addressing political violence and harassment. But above all, we can even initiate programs and trainings that support women interested in leadership. It's a very good thing to, like me as the Algon chairman, I am in the best position to mentor and to empower women and advocate for more women to join politics. But just that I don't have the support. There is nobody that is supporting me. So as soon as I get support, I can just take off and start initiating things for women, like having, like I said, I had it in the rural areas, awareness, but this one we need to be having a general one across the states, the northern states, not only in Kano. That will help, I think.
Well, thank you so much, ma, for that. Our time is fast spent, but we'll open the floor for questions. Please feel free to type them in the chat box and then raise your hand so we can unmute you to speak. So we have just few minutes for our participants to also share their thoughts on this. Do we have any hands raised? Anyone wants to contribute? Okay, we have okay, Kennedy Francis and Bart Samuel. So Kennedy, can you go first, please?
Very good. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I think the best way the women can come on board strongly in the forthcoming election 2027 is to get themselves together, embrace without showing up a political difference or religious or ethnic differences. If you look at the number all over in the world, the number of women and children outnumber, men. If the women can be able to strategically map up themselves, do mapping, political mapping, agenda mapping, and I think they can go a long way. If you look at in areas of corruption, women are good in governance. In fact, like the Hajia from Kano State, I know she have a lot of pass-through situation, lot of abuses or so, but she stood her ground. I also remember the late Senator Aisha Al-Hassan from Taraba State. She did a lot of things more than men in Taraba State. Up to now, there is no man that have come out strongly like that woman. In fact, women have a lot of capacity and capability to win a race. So if they can be able to come together, harness, understand themselves, and throw out, a kind of a habit that will say, oh no, this person is a Muslim, or this person is a Christian, or this person is from this tribe. In fact, they will win a race. And there are some of our men that will really support them in that winning sport. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just to read from Gloria Ibrahim, I think her opinion also supports what our keynote speaker and panelists have been saying. Said law should be put in place to encourage women representation, and the law should also be protecting women in politics and build a support system for them to grow. Thank you, Gloria Ibrahim, for that. And Vatsa Muet, you can speak now.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. So I also want to add a voice, and I'm very happy to be here listening to Mommy Hajia for her presentation and every other person that presented on it, especially the aspect of women participating in politics. I like the point she made about women being strong. They are truly strong, but with limited resources. So I think empowering them in all sense of empowerment will pave the way for women, and awareness being raised about them participating, taking responsibility will go a long way because of our orientation, socialization over time, as already has been presented. So if deliberate efforts are being made, especially if we're talking about empowering women, it's not just resting with those that are learned, because for us who have opportunity to, go to school, have some level of exposure, it's already a liberation for you to seek more knowledge, to want to know. But at the rural level, where majority of the women are, like she mentioned, which is another paramount aspect, even though they won't necessarily take a leadership position, but that aspect of participation, it's very crucial to involving and engaging women to also raise their voices and also support. And that will go a long way in terms of, upbringing of young girls from those rural backgrounds. If they have strong mothers with this sound knowledge, because of our efforts of sensitization, they understand the importance that can be passed to young people, such that, in a society where I come from, community where I come from, most of the girls that go to school, it's always emphasized. The point is that you if you go to school, you get educated, you marry a rich man. How about the girl? So if the mother understand what to tell the girl, that you equally can be rich, you equally can marry and support a husband, I think that message will give them the sense of responsibility and not relying. So that will permeate other aspects of leadership, of participation, taking responsibility. So I think.
All right, thank you very much, Vatsa. Yes, we are running really short of time, but I would like to give Honorable Blessing Wagba an opportunity to speak as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can hear you clear.
All right. First, I want to really appreciate all the speakers for the wonderful insights they have given us with regards to this topic. We've really I've gained a lot. I've added so much to what I already knew, and I want to especially thank them. Then, concerning what the women need to do, what we need to do fast in our situation to accelerate political ascendance, as it were, I would continue to say that we, the women, must always identify what goal we want to achieve. We want to have a niche for ourselves. We want to find the gap in our environment. We want to make ourselves prominent by identifying our goals and then trying to fill that gap. It's very important, because if you have a goal and you carve the niche for yourself and you pursue that niche, you discover that along the line, you follow that trajectory and you're likely to succeed, because you've already decided on the goal you want to achieve. Your goal may be that in your area, women are not represented. Your goal may be that in your area, your people are not represented in your town. In your town, for instance, where I come from in Abia State and in Aba, my people are not represented in the big city of Aba. So your goal may be that you want to come out and have your people represented in their own town. In that case, you walk around that goal, speak to people, get them to understand that goal, and that will continue to energize you as you pursue that cause. Then the other thing is that we must not allow ourselves to be cowed by the men, because most men do not have as much of what we have. It's just that this patriarchy in the system that has given them that impetus to continue to speak to us, relate to us as if we are second-hand citizens. Let us not allow ourselves to be what they want us to be. We went to school like them. We are well socialized. We have many qualities that they don't have, but they try to talk us down and make us have reduce our confidence in ourselves. So I am advocating that women must remain strong and believe in themselves that they can do it. The other thing is that we, the women, must continue to qualify ourselves, that is, upgrade ourselves so that we will be current. Like now, if you want to be in politics, you need the social media, you need the AI, you need so many other things that can enable you to speak to the people, relate to the world effectively, you know, and not the usual clumsy way we used to do. So you need to upgrade yourselves, attend seminars, attend workshops, so you'll be up to date and be current. That will help us to meet up. So these are some of the things I want to add to the beautiful things the speakers have already spoken. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ma. I'll give room for one more speaker. Ms. Amina Akanubelo, please, over to you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, P1, for organizing this important webinar, and all the speakers. I must say that these conversations are timely, and I'm glad to participate in these important conversations. All the speakers have demonstrated their expertise, you know, in advancing gender equality and women's participation in governance. I was super excited, you know, to learn that we have a media tycoon in the room in person of Mrs. Adaura. Of course, we know that she has done a lot to leverage the media to give women a voice. But in addition to the excellent, you know, recommendations that the speakers have made in relation to promotion of women's participation in governance, we need to harness the power of media, you know, to continue to highlight the stories of female political leaders, you know, through social media, advocacy campaigns, you know, and, you know, various platforms. We need to be deliberate about consensus building, using the whole of government and whole of society approaches to really provide enabling environment for women to be able to step forward and take leadership positions and fulfill their rights to representation. I think that is important. We should all remember that women cannot do this alone. We need to influence more men and boys to become gender champions and women empowerment allies. Lastly, we need to create awareness about the significance of women's participation. We cannot overemphasize that. We need to create awareness about the significance of women's participation and representation in decision-making, promote value reorientation, and collectively work to ensure that the bill on special seats is actually passed into law as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ma. Unfortunately, because of our time, we'll not be able to take more speakers on this. But we see your comments, we see your contributions, and please be rest assured that they'll be collated and we'll use them to drive future conversations that will bring about change to urgently foster women's involvement in politics, especially with the upcoming 2027 elections. It's been an interesting session today. I would like to say a huge thank you to all our speakers, keynote speaker, for sharing their expertise. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you so much. But before we let you go, all our reports, the assessment P1 carried out, the beyond voting, increasing women's participation in Nigerian political process, the gender-based security threat assessment. We have all of these available for free download on our website on www.partnersnigeria.org. Thank you once again, everyone, for your time. We appreciate your time and participation, and we say have a great day, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Wow, thank you very much, all the speakers and coordinators of the program. God bless you all.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. God bless
I
you
do.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you, P1.
It is so long.